Hello and very welcome everybody to another very special interview episode on Random Urban Memories. We have had now a couple of these and a few more are lined up, and it's been quite a ride, and we're talking to some very interesting people in the background, so hopefully you're enjoying listening and seeing them as much as we are producing and recording them. Remember to hit us up on social media. Just search for Random Urban Memories wherever you get your podcasts or your social media, and you're bound to find us there. And do subscribe, do share. It helps a lot. Now, who we have today, it's Kelvin O'Connor, who's the membership officer of Atheist Ireland. He tells his story of how he came to be in the organisation Atheist Ireland and what it is exactly that they do. How do they do it? We touch on issues such as the church cover-up of abuse, the impact that they've had on our society, and some of the legislative changes that have come about through the referenda, and how all of this affects us as a society in general, the changes that have been coming about, and also what's the mood of the country and how is atheism perceived right now, because we're seeing a lot of changes towards secularism, more shift towards separating church and state, and what the role of Atheist Ireland is in that as well, and also some personal background and history from the three of us. And Katrina joins us in this interview, and she heard some things that were kind of a bit new to her as well, or maybe some insights that she might not have been aware of beforehand. So I think she took away a lot from this interview as well. And also me, who does follow Atheist Ireland on social media, but to actually get more of a direct glimpse and more of a direct connection into the organisation. So it was he was an absolute splendid, that's not something you use very often, but he was an absolutely splendid interview guest. He's very good radio presence. I thoroughly enjoyed the interview. We all came away from it, I think, very pleased, and it just went absolutely A-OK, and really enjoyed it. And hopefully we get to follow up with him at some stage. And in fact, I liked his studio presence so much that if the stars align correctly and timing wise, I would love to actually have him on just as a guest host to discuss the themes that we generally tend to do, which tend to be quite random. So absolutely. So shout out to him, shout out to Atheist Ireland. Look them up. There's going to be links in the descriptions below. So hopefully you can take something away from this. So, learn something different, hear it from a different perspective. You might have been concerned about organizations, like with the name Atheist Ireland, which sometimes has negative connotations with it, or even you're a bit concerned about the preachy, militant aspect about atheism as well, if you look at some YouTube videos. So hopefully this might be enlightening for you. You can take something away from it. And regardless of what your position is on religion as such, and that's one thing we don't do within this interview, we don't really get into a theological debate. This is not what this interview was about. This is about policy change. This is about how the church institution has affected this country and what it's doing now and what the future is going to be. So if you can take something away from that and maybe even keep abreast of the situation in these matters, then hopefully you can. So anyway, I'm not going to waffle on much further. Do enjoy the video or the audio as well, obviously. So thank you very much for giving us your time. And again, thank you to Kelvin for being here. So enjoy it. We'll talk soon. And we love you very much.
This is Random Urban Memories, brought to you by the Rum Boys. You've seen, heard, or felt it on the streets. Well, we're here to talk about it.
In 3, 2, 1.
And hello, here we are at the interview with
Kelvin O'Connor.
Kelvin O'Connor, thank you very much for joining us. And running this gig is going to be my co-host, Kat. Say hello.
Hi, how are you? Welcome, Kelvin, to our podcast.
Thanks.
Really hope you enjoy
spending a bit of time with us this afternoon, and we will. We're really looking forward to this. Just to find out everything out about the subject today. I really don't know where to start, Shane. I think it's more for me. I think it'd be more your history, where you're from, how just tell us a lot about yourself. I'm really interested to know.
Okay, so I'll go on the usual ramble about myself as an
go
introduction.
ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm originally from Galway, so it's nice to do a local podcast as well, I have to say. I suppose my history as regards Atheist Ireland, and first of all, I should say I'm the membership officer with Atheist Ireland. But more interestingly than that, I think, is I do the monthly Galway information table that we host on Shop Street, usually the last Saturday of every month. So if anyone's listening, wants to catch us there, hopefully they'll find us there.
Cool, yeah.
And I suppose the history of me with Atheist Ireland would start around 2009 when there was a lot of things coming out about there was reports about child abuse and all sort of a lot of negative press, let's say. And it hadn't directly affected me or anything like that, but I just thought, I don't really go to church anymore. I don't really think I want to be associated with that. So I just went, you know what, I'd like to just leave, because I was aware that because I'd done the baptism, communion and confirmation, that I was counted as a member. And even a lot of the articles at the time would have always quoted the number of members of the Catholic Church in Ireland and all that. And I went, you know what, I don't really want to be in that number. I wasn't too excited or anything at the time. And I found about this website at the time that had been set up probably because of like-minded people called countmeout.ie.
Yes.
And they had a fairly simple process at the time. You printed off a form and you filled in a couple of details. You sent it off, and they would basically process the application from there, and essentially you could leave the Catholic Church. I might have procrastinated maybe a month or two longer than I should have, and the Vatican actually closed the loopholes in the canon law. They changed their laws. It was like having the door shut in your face as you're about to get out the door. No, just too late. A couple of months too late.
Wow. How did that make you feel? Like, how did you feel?
Well, I was about to say, I likened it to having the door slammed in your face. Have you ever had that? It tends to piss one off. It's like,
of course.
I just went, no, this isn't right. And the more I thought about it, I went, well, they actually went to the trouble of changing this law, and there was never any figures released as to how many had successfully gotten through. But I went, geez, I can't be the only one. If they changed the law, something was happening there, and they've stopped it.
Just to clarify for the listeners and the viewers, is the Count Me Out study and filling out the forms is for you to make a declaration to the Vatican that you are now not a believer.
Yes, but at the time it was a bit more than a declaration. It was actually it was a proper process that actually got you out. But that was based on a couple of canon law. It's nearly like the Vatican Constitution, essentially. They have a set of rules, and they edited them to close that loophole so that they were no longer accepting.
So they literally denied you the right to leave the church officially.
Yes.
Rather than from a spiritual perspective.
And,
incredible.
My mother will always laugh and say, if you want Kelvin to do something, tell him he can't do it, like tell him it's not allowed.
What year was this, Kelvin? What year was this that you decided to do this? What year? What was it?
2009.
Okay. So recent enough then.
Yeah. I suppose from there, it was a slow process. I didn't have a eureka moment, but I just started looking into it. Okay, you can't do that. And then I just started questioning the whole system, and obviously more stuff came up. There was a constant thread of news. It just annoyed me more and more. And then I guess I just started happening to read some science books. I would name check like Cosmos, Carl Sagan is a great one, and that's not it's a fantastic book, and he is not in any way overtly atheist, but it just gets you thinking about science and how
reason,
so much,
exploration of
all of this good stuff thing of
beauty. Yeah.
But then that led me to the God Delusion, Richard Dawkins, and that's a little bit more okay. Now we're in the territory of a de facto atheist book, and it just all made sense to me,
Yeah.
you know, and
That's where we go into the territory of what people call militant atheism, even though it is theoretically just facts,
yes.
but because they're repeated loudly
Mm-hmm.
and strongly, quite strongly, that's why it's seen as more militant than anything else.
But even more militant than that then is God Is Not Great, Christopher Hitchens. And that's when it gets... and I loved his style of writing. And I just...
absolutely.
Wow. And like, I'm nowhere near as articulate or as well read as him, but he certainly was very inspiring in a lot of ways.
He had no fear of engaging anybody in debate, even though whereas a lot of other scientists and non-believers would simply not bother.
Yes.
Because they know what they don't believe. But Hitchens, he couldn't wait.
Yeah.
He couldn't wait. And that's why.
And the charisma and everything. Yes.
But apart from that, yeah.
So that was fine, but I still had no vent system for any of this. So it was all, I won't say it was all in my head, but you know what I mean? I was reading this, I was finding out these things, but there was no real way to share it or to, put it into action, apart from me having drinks in the pub and chatting to my friends and realizing that most, I got strong agreements, and I realized I was actually surrounded by people who thought the same as me, but no one was speaking it. And then you start talking to other people, and I started to realize, wow, in this country, we've got, and we'll come on to like census results and other stuff later, but we have a very interesting setup that, and there's a fear of the word atheism we discussed earlier, and there's this kind of, but there's also like a silence of we don't talk about that. You don't, and a lot of people would, describe themselves as Catholics, but yet when it comes down to whether it's maybe eating meat on Good Friday or, their opinions on different political topics, there's a discrepancy there.
Yeah.
And it just fascinated me. There's almost like this, I would describe it as almost like this hidden subculture of non-belief in this that no one's talking about. Mm-hmm. And it's weird. And
absolutely. Absolutely.
And around this time then, TV3 ran a program with Vincent Brown. I might have the name slightly wrong, but I think it was Challenging Beliefs or Challenging God, something to that effect.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Challenging Beliefs. Yeah, I remember
it was.
that. Yeah.
Okay. And one of the episodes I found very enjoyable had a gentleman called Michael Nugent on it versus a priest. And I thought, okay, this is an Irishman, and he may not be quite Christopher Hitchens, but he's very well spoken. Just I really admired that, and it came up that he was from Atheist Ireland. So I looked up Atheist Ireland and okay, I can join here. And then it just so happened they had a meeting, like almost like a membership drive, but not really. They were just in Galway at the time. So I said I'd meet up with them. And I just said, well, what can I do?
Yeah.
And so one of the things then was they were trying to set up more information tables around the country just to get the name out there. So I started doing a few of those, and I have to say it's really enjoyable it's scary, but it's really enjoyable to put yourself out there on a street with a banner in front of you with a big scary word atheist, and just see how people react to it. And you see the full gamut of reactions. There's obviously can be a lot of negativity, but also a lot of like curiosity and positivity.
I'd say a bit more inquisitive, sort of an idea towards it and what you're all about, and and obviously I'd say you'd have a lot of people there would be like me that would be very interested in it but know nothing about it. Do you know what I mean? And I would be hoping that you would get a lot of people coming up asking you questions about that.
Yes,
do you know what I mean? I know you probably get a lot of negative sort of belief as well, which can be tough as well. But from a positive point of view, I would hope that you'd have a lot of people coming up and talking to you about it and questioning you about it, like the way we are, like the way I would be now with you today. But I would love to know what kind of comments you're getting from your table. Are you getting generally positive, or is it mixed, or?
It's definitely mixed. Every type of reaction you can think of, we've probably had it. On one end of the scale, you will have a I've had like little old ladies tell me I was going straight to hell for this, with a little hint of glee in their voice that has to be noted, you know.
Right, okay.
And then you will have people who come up.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Of course.
Then you will have people who are more articulate, but on that end of the fence come up and be like, you're wrong, and I'll tell you why you're wrong, and maybe they'll have a little rant at you for a while. Then further up the scale, there's people who are of those beliefs as well, but will have a more engaging conversation.
Yeah.
And at this point in the scale, I'm enjoying it because I'm like, okay, let's talk, and you know, if you can make people walk away from the table and just go, yeah, maybe there's something there to explore. If you just have them to think at all, because I think a lot of those people have never really had this challenge before, especially in Ireland, and that it's
openly.
Openly. You know, the neck of meat to stand on the street with atheism, it just astonishes people in a lot of ways. And then you will have the more middle ground then at that stage is, like you said, curiosity. Why do you need an organization for atheists? Like, they might go, I'm an atheist, but what's this group about?
Yeah.
And like, what's going on here? And I guess we'll talk about that in more detail in a second, but while we're going through reactions. And then you will have people literally almost overjoyed to see you. They go, I'm so glad you're here. I can't believe, you know, in this country, I thought everyone was Catholics. And but what's also very interesting is, because I'm almost describing the range of Irish responses there, but there's a lot of curiosity from tourists, especially Shop Street in Galway. It's full of tourists. They're like, what's going on here? And then maybe explain a bit about the education system, or the fact that we had a blasphemy law, or have, you know, religious oaths for presidents, this kind of stuff. And what, you know? And but also then there's equally an equal amount of tourists that are just convinced that, I thought everybody was Catholic here. What's happening here, you know? So it's fascinating, and it's kind of intoxicating almost. You know, you can't get enough of it now. Just talking to people about their beliefs, because it's so interesting. And whether you would describe it as a negative thing, if someone has, you know, strong religious beliefs and coming up to you, I think it's fascinating.
So here's a question that I've been thinking of. Would it be the more negative side from an older generation of people that you would be talking to, or you know, would you have the same sort of reaction from my generation, our generation, and or would you get a different, like how are the ages perceiving this whole atheist thing in Ireland? It's more, I kind of looking at it now as more of a generational thing. Like my mum, who is in her 80s, would still, you know, she probably wouldn't entertain it now, but she's at the point now where she's like, yeah, whatever. But I would love to know, like, there's still a good percentage of people that go to church and go to mass and stuff that are an older generation than us. And then for me, like growing up in a Catholic household, that I don't go to church and I don't practice Catholicism because of the church and stuff like that. I would like to know kind of the difference in the generations. Is it different, or are we more open to it now? Is it?
Sure. So I would say from, that must be going on 5 years doing the tables now. What I would say is, well, I think if you look at statistics on a national level, clearly younger generations tend to be more open-minded and more likely to be atheists than older generations. But if I were to ignore all that and try and, you know, imagine what the country is like from my interactions at tables, I would say there's no difference in age at all. And what you have to consider is, what you're really talking about is the people that are willing to come up to the table and engage a conversation. And I guess that takes a little bit of courage and a little bit of interest.
Yeah.
And for those two factors, age is not involved. So I've had like such surprising moments where little old ladies come up to you and you think they're going to tell you, like the one I mentioned, you think they're going to tell you, going to hell, and be like, I'm so glad you're here. I've been, you know, years kind of keeping this thing secret. It's only now I feel like I can talk about it. It's great. And the flip side is, sometimes you will have younger people come up and they're utterly religious, and whether it's their upbringing and they're totally on the other side.
They're fresh in their belief and maybe not as afraid as an old person.
So I would say I'm surprised more often than not, actually. And there was one woman stands out in particular last year. Was woman maybe in her 60s, from one of the red states. I think it might have been Texas. She came up and she introduced herself as such. And I was ready going, oh, here we
comes
go.
the Bible passages.
And she wasn't an atheist, so you might have been expecting me to say that as she wasn't. But what she was very, I believe everybody should make up their own mind, and very open. And I told her about like the marriage equality thing. She said, yeah, everyone should be allowed, do what they want as long as it's not harming anyone. And essentially, even though she described herself as a Christian, everything she said was more the voice of like humanism. It was just, there was compassion. And in a way, she was what a lot of Christians claim to be, but aren't. If you know what I mean. Yeah, and I was so, and she said it was lovely talking to him, exchanged names, and she was just a lovely lady.
That's nice though.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. Again,
I'm so glad that you said that. I was really expecting it to be
the typical.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so glad you said that it was very open, that you had so many different young and older and different generations saying so many different things to you, which is something I didn't expect, to be quite honest with you. I was expecting my own, but the way I thought was like the older generations that still go to mass and still do the novena and still do all those church going things, that they would be coming up bashing you, or they would be coming up and saying negative things to you, while me and, our generation, my generation, would be kind of more open to it. But then I'm sure there's probably plenty of people that are my generation as well that are still the belief of whatever they have. You know what I mean? It's still quite prevalent, I think, and it's becoming more open. I'm delighted to hear that there's a mixed reaction to this. And
it has had the positive effect to me that it has it basically erased my preconceived notions about it being an age thing. Even though, like I say, statistically, nationally, there probably is an age thing. But just when you go to talk to someone, you don't know what to expect in terms of their beliefs.
But there is hope.
Yeah.
Actually, to roll back to something, now that we've gone through a couple of bits, can you clarify, please, for the people out there, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the term itself.
Yes.
What is atheism?
So, an atheist is very simply someone who does not believe there is a God. And I think what I'd like to put it in terms of reference against is the word agnosticism, and which actually is a bit more of a debatable word. And I'll tell you why. We mentioned the God delusion in that in one of the earlier chapters. Dawkins creates a scale. It's a 7-point scale. Okay. I won't go through all 7 points, but I just want to landmarks is actually, I might have the 0 and the 7 mixed up, but you get the idea. Yes. One end of the scale is you're absolutely 100% no doubt that there is a God, and 7 might be you're absolutely 100% that there is no God. And he describes himself, I think, as a 6, which is strongly believes that there is no God, but you obviously cannot be certain. And I believe he defines an agnostic as midway in the scale, where they're kind of sitting on the fence and not really sure. I don't strictly agree with that. I prefer to define it, the difference between an agnostic and an atheist, very simply in the terminology of the sentence they use. And I'll put it like this. I think I'm both. I'm an atheist because I don't believe there is a God. I'm an agnostic because I don't know if there is a God or not. And it's very simply, it's almost the same sentence, but it's belief and knowing. And I think someone who says they know 100% that there is no God, to me, that's equally as ridiculous as saying, 100% that there is a God. You can't know that. And to claim that you know that is you pushing your luck. You're claiming to know something you can't possibly know, and that to me is an absolute no. That's what I can't stand. Is people claiming to know.
You should say this. Yeah. Okay.
That's brilliant.
Because it's for me. I would slot into. It's just that's the funny thing about it as well. In a sense, I just have a lack of belief, and I had said this to colleagues yesterday, and their mind was blown. They said, "But you have to believe something." I said, "You actually don't." Like, I go about my day as is. I have human interactions, I have daily interactions, I have internal interactions, work interactions, whatever it is. I'm not burdened by the forethought of spirituality or anything like that as to how do I fit into the universe. I just enjoy every second of being part of the universe. Oh, that sounds that sounds new agey, but you get what I'm saying. But
it's great though that you're saying that, though, Shane.
But there is simply no. I just don't think about it. You know, it does not influence my daily life at all, and that kind of gives me a relaxation in that sense.
Yeah.
Can I add a little story to that? Because it reminds me of a story that Michael Nugent, chairperson of Atheist Ireland, who I mentioned earlier.
Very fascinating guy. Check him out.
Yeah. He has a story where he was up in one of the Scandinavian countries. I forget exactly which one. Mm-hmm. He was on a train, and there happened to be a couple of students sitting across from him. And they got talking as you do on trains across. And he said, so, you know, being aware that he's largely in kind of an atheistic country anyway, he said, do you believe in God? And they paused for a second, and he was surprised that they paused, because he thought they'd be straight away no, and they went, you know, we've never thought about it before.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even a thing over there. It's, you know,
that is exactly
it's
just simply not a thing, and I'm not bothered by it, and I'm not scared like the soul that go to hell, or what might, you know, Pascal's wager. Maybe I should be doing something spiritually in case at the end there is something. But I find that that's just I wake up and I go to sleep and I do my thing.
I love Pascal's wager, because one of the hilarious things about it is it's supposed to be about this belief of this all-knowing God and whatever, but like he's somehow going to be fooled if you go, oh, you know, I believe. It's just it's sort of weird.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. It's fascinating now to listen to both of you. Well, I think I was told to believe. Do you know what I mean? From my point of view, it was going to school, and it was drilled into me at school, and drilled into me like yourself with the communion and the confirmation and everything. And I remember saying to Shane in a conversation we had previous, where I was kind of going, I was 7, 8 when my communion. I do honestly remember standing there in the church and going, well, why do I need to be here? What's the reason for this? Why do I have to believe in God? Do you know, I questioned it from such a young age, and I still question it to this day, but I kind of I'm more at one with myself now as a positive energy, and I'm kind of more a spiritual person with the universe and stuff. That's more me now, and I'm more happier living my life like that. But
it's not without coincidence that nearly 100% of the time, you're going to be the religion of your parents.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? That's not a coincidence, because you were told that it is. And just touching on the point of youth and indoctrination, it's nothing else. It is nothing else. It is brainwashing, which is usually associated with cult. But being told something over and over again without finding, showing, or without questioning is cult behavior, you know? Yeah. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, what really bothered me was that my 5-year-old daughter asked me where rain came from, which is a fairly sensible question to ask, because I always tell her, question everything, find out how it works, because there's so much fascinating stuff out there. Yeah. So she asked, where does rain come from? So I gave her a 20-minute incredibly boring spiel of how weather systems work. It was at the bus stop just across my house, and God, it was fascinating for me, but so boring for her. But I told her everything, how the weather cycle works. But this only served the purpose of confusing her, because she said, "I thought God made rain." That enraged me. On a fundamental level, that it really annoyed me, because we know how weather systems work. It's provable. It's out there. We're in it. But now my 5-year-old daughter is burdened with doubt, because her authority figure, her dad, is trying to tell her something that's knowable and provable. But she's now conflicted, because this figure, God, is supposed to have made it. Now she's in two minds, and that is unfair. If she discovered this as an adult, and through her own reasoning or non-reasoning, she lands on religion, then that's entirely up to her. But a 5-year-old to be burdened with existential doubt?
I know what I love about that story, though. Great credit to your daughter, because she, in her own words, she thought God did it, but she still asked you.
She needed affirmation.
But that's great. So she still questioned it.
So I bored her even more with facts then.
But she loved it.
Yeah. She loved it.
Yeah.
But Yeah, just to the point of early brainwashing.
Just on that, there's a beautiful kids book by Richard Dawkins, The Magic of Reality, beautifully illustrated.
Yeah.
Have you come across this?
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, you need to. And what it does is each chapter addresses things like rainbows, earthquakes, I'm forgetting some of them, it's been a while, but lots of these phenomena the kids will question. Yeah. And what it does is juxtaposes the first little bit of the chapter, gives some historic explanations, primarily religious ones or superstitious ones about where rainbows came from. And it touches on all cultures. So like, you know, the Mayans or like the Aborigines would have all had different stories about where the world came from or why rainbows exist or what earthquakes are. And then the second half of the chapter is, okay, these are the real reasons. Yeah. But in a very child-friendly, simple way. It's actually, there's an adult version as well without illustrations. It's really easy read. It's fascinating, you know.
Some adults could do with that too.
Yeah. It's actually it's the first book I always recommend because there is an adult version with no illustrations, just the text, and and it's an easy read because it's not too, you know, technical or whatever, and so you learn a bit of science and a bit about beliefs as well. It's a great book, so I recommend that.
And now having explained and introduced atheism, but we've already touched now. What I want to talk about is the perception of atheism in our culture, especially Ireland. Places like the US or whatever, it seems to be a little bit more militant against it, but we're talking about hardcore specific churches or whatever. But in Ireland in general now, how do you think it's actually perceived? You gave us a little bit now with some of the interactions that you had, but as a whole.
Yeah, or even just to focus, I suppose, for a minute on the word before we even branch out. A common comment we actually get within Atheist Ireland from our members is that they wish we'd call ourselves Secularism Ireland or something of that nature. That's because it's less antagonistic, a little bit less militant, perhaps even. And because of, I suppose, the word militant and atheism seem to be best buds in a lot of conversations, you know. But I'm firmly on the side of Michael on this, who says that we're called Atheist Ireland and we use the word
as intended.
As intended, but because it's has such a negative rep, it's important to get out there and normalize the use of the word. I think it was in 2015. There's a great statistic that in the Dáil in Ireland, the word atheist or atheism was used more in that year than in the previous 10 years combined. And it's through our lobbying them and getting topics like marriage equality and the blasphemy and all of these topics, and, you know, getting it out there into the politicians' minds and lobbying it's now become much more normal to use the word than it had been. And it's only by using a word that you can normalize it and demystify it. And, you know, we're having this conversation now, and hundreds, thousands of conversations over the years. It's not scary. It's very, you know, we defined what it is. It's very simple, and it's nothing to do with sacrificing goats or anything sinister, or it's simply, you know, we don't have a word for people that believe that the sun goes around the world. We don't have a word for that. You know, it's not needed. We need atheism at the minute because it's not a common thing. But in the end, a bit like our organisation, our goal really is for Atheist Ireland to not need to exist anymore.
Very good way of putting it.
In terms of like the marriage referendum, the marriage equality and abortion and those sort of votes that have had come and gone in the last couple of years here in Ireland, what role has Atheist Ireland played in those sort of maybe helping the likes of the government see, or, you know, what part did you play in that?
It will vary by which one we're talking about. For instance, we were, I believe, very instrumental in the blasphemy one. We were nearly the only lobby group. It fell on us to almost entirely promote that.
It wasn't even on people's radar.
No, it wasn't.
It
No.
was absolutely not on
It was
people's
there on the
radar.
voting cards.
Yes.
And people gave out stink because they said, do we not have anything better to do?
Yes.
Yeah, can we not spend money on something better?
But obviously it needed to be changed because it was still instituted in the Irish law. Obviously it needed to be changed. So obviously that was the reason why it was put there.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, we got out there on radio shows and explained that there was two key factors in getting rid of it, at least two. The main ones we felt strongly about were first of all, the international effects it has. Mm-hmm. So Michael in particular and Jane, our education officer, often go in front of UN human rights councils and these kind of conventions. And you have the likes of Pakistan and these places that are enforcing a blasphemy law with executions constantly.
Of course.
And, you know, the UN comes along and says, no, you can't be doing that. And they turn around and go, but one of your members there, Ireland, has
proudly written into
not
it.
only a blasphemy law, but actually one that they aspire to. They actually held us up as this is a way a blasphemy law should be written.
Yeah.
And, you know, okay, we weren't prosecuting people or that in general. But they were, and it's bad enough that we're just a shining example for them to as an excuse to carry on their behaviour. But not only that, but just because there's no prosecutions, a friend of mine, also an atheist Ireland, was doing interviews, and he was told you can't say this and this before you come on. The blasphemy law had a chilling effect, and it stifled debate, and it has for years because individuals or companies or whoever they are, they don't have the money to get involved in legal battles. The very fact that you can be prosecuted is enough for all of that to stop. But delightfully, that's all in the past now. We're past that, you know. We would have had we helped out as much as we could for repeal the 8th, but we wouldn't, you know, there was an awful lot of there was a groundswell of support for that. So we would have been only a very small part of that. We were proudly in favour of that as well, because, I mean, it is and was a religiously inspired law and a belief system, you know. Marriage equality, the same.
Yeah. I think what a common misconception is, and I see this on never read the comments, good God, on social media. It's one of those things. But what I see a lot is, what's next? Are they going to take this? Are they going to blah? And then, you know what I mean? Like, what are they trying to institute? Are they going to take our rights? Just to be very clear out there, this lobbying and this working behind the scenes and trying the best, it's clearly a path for separation of church and state, to make it more official and to hopefully one day to have it completely separate. But the one thing you're not doing is taking away someone's right to do this. What we're doing is we're ensuring that the church has, any church, but predominantly the Catholic Church, has no more influence on policy, on law, and anything else. It is entirely your prerogative if you want to go and believe. Nobody's stopping you. If you want to donate to the church, if you want to become active or just believe and pray, nobody is stopping you. And this is a very key factor. It's just that you can't have an institution that is not a political party have influence on law and how we are affected. And that goes for educational programs like sex education and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Or even how policy and like the blasphemy law and all these kind of things. That's the aim of the game, I think, isn't it? This political lobbying.
Yeah. So I suppose the education system is a very important one to talk about when you talk about secularism and, you know, and rights get brought up, and rights to education and the right to religious education. All of this stuff crops up. And, you know, the common thread is like, what you'll find is people say, okay, well, we've all our Catholic schools, sure. Let the atheists go off and build their schools, and let you know, if there's Jews and Protestants, and so even if everybody had
these are
bottomless
comments.
pockets.
These are comments. Why are these atheists in here? Let them. Why don't they find their own schools?
Yeah. Can you imagine though? Like, you take a small village of maybe.
I'm in shock that you just said that.
Yeah,
I really am.
Get that a lot.
That's just shocked me.
Can you imagine how ridiculous? And we will say there will always be discrimination anyway, because, you know, you can't even put a figure on how many religions there are. But even if you said, let's do the top 10 religions, so you're going to have 10 different primary schools, right? even if there were possible, in every village, so that every child had access, right? And do you know what that's called? That's called segregation.
There you go.
There you go.
So
something that we grew up with.
Yeah.
I grew up with that too.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's kind of like, well, it would be nice. I would send my child off to a different school if there was a choice. It was at the time when this was a really big issue. Still is, but what was it, 97, 98%? Well, now I think it's gone down with more divestments with Educate Together.
Yeah,
but
well,
if
Educate Together is becoming a good
alternative. But
alternative.
if 94% of the schools are Catholic, you have no choice. And let's be realistic, you can't just build a school
No.
just for your own child. You know what I mean?
I think it's disingenuous to say that someone has a choice of sending their child to an Educate Together school if they have to drive 2 hours to get there.
It's ridiculous, yeah.
It technically, but
It's possible, but it's
not realistic.
Well, thankfully, the Educate Together system is becoming more open and more
prevalent,
more available now. Which is even to the point where they're actually even looking at secondary schooling for Educate Together, because at the moment it's only primary schools, and I do think that's the way forward, where my own nephews go to an Educate Together, and then I have friends here in Galway that are sending their kids to an Educate Together where they're taught about everything. They're given the information on everything, and they make their own choices. The kids make their own choices, which is great. Instead of going to a predominantly Catholic school where that's what you're told to. You're taught the Catholicism. You're taught that. And that's what you're told to believe. Like Shane said earlier about the whole cult status of this, I think it's great that finally something's opening up about this. But going back to what you said earlier, I'm still in shock here that you're saying, the whole segregation thing. I find I'm fascinated by it, that people are actually thinking that in this day and age. And
well, to be clear, I don't think they think about it as segregation when they suggest it. They just think Catholics pay for their, which by the way, it's taxpayers paying for it anyway.
Yeah.
But leaving that aside, it's this notion that let atheists go off and build their own schools. Let Jews go off and build their own schools. Let everyone pay for their own schools. And sure, won't we all be happy then? Everyone will have their own school.
Yeah,
But in the end, it is segregation then.
Yeah, of course.
And just that point there as well, very misconceived and not thought about by people who don't give this much thought, is, as you said it, the hospitals, the schools, other institutions are entirely taxpayer funded.
Yes.
Not a cent comes from the Vatican. So that is why it is important to get religion out of schools, so that when you send your child to school, they learn about whatever it is, maths, languages and all that kind of stuff. The religion thing can always be done. You can go to church and get religious education.
Yeah.
But have an even keel for everybody, which is education. And afterwards, outside of school, do what it is you want, because every cent. But now here we are. My taxpayers' money is funding groups like Accord, who give utterly ridiculous level of sex education. Yeah,
it's not just your tax money; it's all our tax money.
All of our tax money.
Yeah,
and it is not secular education. It is entirely biased towards Catholicism. And that leaves out all the other religions as well, who are also paying taxes to send their kids to school. Yeah. So just for you guys out there as well, this is just a key factor. It's just, if the Vatican was paying 70% of these schools, then I think it would be a different story.
Yeah.
But every cent of it comes from tax.
An important aspect of what you're saying there, and you mentioned hospitals, it's important when you think about these things, and that's whether you're atheist, Catholic or otherwise, is perspectives and relativity. So the first thing I'll say is you would immediately realize there was something very wrong with the hospital who turned away non-Catholics. We wouldn't stand for that. But somehow it's okay for our schools to do that.
Yep.
Why? That doesn't make any sense. And then the other thing is that we at Atheist Ireland would always say we're actually as opposed to schools that would teach atheism as the truth. We're as opposed to that as we are to Catholic schools.
Yeah.
The only way to be inclusive is to be neutral.
Yes.
One of our members was down in Kerry was torn with the schools, and it was like an open day, and they had a big, huge crucifix up on the wall, and they were having this day of remembrance where the students would write a message to their loved ones that had passed away and pin it onto the crucifix, right? Okay. And Peter said, okay, but what about the atheist kids or non-believers? What do they do? And she goes, oh, no. We're very inclusive here. Atheists can pin their memories on the crucifix as well. So
it's this bizarre blindness towards other.
They believe they're being inclusive, but that's not how you include people, Yeah. It's like this, oh no, the atheists can come to mass as well. It's like, no, you're missing.
That's not how this works.
You're missing the point,
Yeah. And actually, that kind of segues kind of nicely into your opinion on this cultural Catholicism, and I think Pope Francis had said something about that as well. He said something along I don't have the quote in my head now, but something along the lines of it's better to be an atheist than to just be a part-time Catholic kind of thing, as in we have people, and I know many of them, that go through the motions because that is how it's done.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on this kind of...
Yeah, so it ties back to what I said earlier about almost this subculture of non-believers. I mean,
yes.
For instance, the most recent census, we had about 78% Catholics, 5 or 6% decrease on the previous one.
Yeah.
Yet, if you look at the census results, you would expect the percentages of, let's say the no vote to be broadly in line with that. They're not. They're almost the opposite of it. So, for instance, the blasphemy passed by 2-1, 66 to 33%. That's almost the flip of 78% Catholics. There's nothing lining up there. So what that proves is, beyond doubt, there is a significant number of people who describe themselves as Catholics, but do not adhere to, quite frankly, some of the core tenets of their belief, and it seems to me that almost a side story. People seem to associate Catholicism and Irishness as the same thing. I forgot to go through.
You hit the nail on the head there.
So I forgot to mention we were on about reactions to tables. There's been so many. It's hard to remember them all. But I stood talking to a chap for 5 minutes who was vehemently opposed to what I believed or what I had to say. And at the end, he got annoyed at me. And he told me to, I'm going to paraphrase this slightly because I don't want to swear, but to go back to my own country.
Wow.
Yeah.
In the middle of Galway. Now, the least we can say about this chap is he doesn't have an ear for accents.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really offended. You have to have a thick skin a little bit.
Yes,
So,
put yourself out there.
But it was just such a bizarre thing to say to me. Like, just, you got it so wrong on so many levels. But it was fascinating to think of like how much he thought of Catholicism and Irishness as the same thing. I was an atheist, therefore I wasn't Irish. Like it was as simple as that to him, That's a commentary you hit the nail on the head. And then you have to wonder, think about what that would mean when you're filling out the census form. You're pretty much going to, another belief might be just simply the fact that, okay, I was baptized Catholic, therefore I need to take Catholic.
That is something I'd like to talk about as well, because that's another good point. I have seen people do this, and there was an issue with the census, even though we're talking about nearly 470,000 people who actually consciously ticked no religion. Okay.
Yes.
But I think we can safely make an assumption that there is actually quite a larger number that tick Catholicism without even realizing. And I can include a family member as well, who simply ticked it because, and I think it had to do with the wording of the census, because people were primed, because I had cultural and ethnic background questioned beforehand, and you were already biased towards ticking what you, as in baptized and therefore I am. And I caught people actually doing it, and I said, are you practicing? Are you practicing? Are you religiously practicing? They're like, no. And I was like, then...
Isn't it a fascinating mindset, though? Can you imagine ticking the, like you said, you're married, right? Can you imagine ticking the single box on the census form because you were born single? Like,
that's actually, wow, that is actually a really good point.
Like,
Thank you.
Just mad. Like.
Thank you for my future arguments.
Boom.
Boom. There you go. Interview done. Thanks, folks. Thank you. That was a perfectly good point. There you go. Now, imagine the amount of people. I'd say we can add a couple of tens of thousands more to that because it's just without even a second
Well, I'd
thought.
say on the next census, things will be a lot different.
Oh, dear.
I will definitely think the next census,
Atheist Ireland is lobbying.
which will
rephrase.
definitely be a lot different in terms of a lot of things on the census.
Well, see, the thing is, if the results are skewed, the census is there to give an accurate representation of statistics that is happening, a snapshot of that moment.
Yeah.
And if you can add, if you can make that the amount of atheists, of people of no religion and not practicing. Yeah, that's another cultural indicator. This literally informs policy.
But do you think there should be something to say there that it's that on the census form, you know, there's certain categories, but should there be a category to say non-practicing, even though we're still in this you know, do you think that there should be something there? I'm not saying white and black. I'm just saying, can I grey it up a bit and kind of going to go, okay, well, we're just figuring all this out now.
I was baptized.
I
am not religious
I'm not
now.
religious. Yeah.
I am practicing.
What do you think about that?
I think it's nuanced because you have to be careful with census. The organisers and that of a census will always say you have to be able to establish patterns. There needs to be consistency to the questions.
Absolutely.
You can't just a local survey. It's an actual tool. Yeah.
But it's a proven fact as well that if your religion is lucky enough to get a tick box in the form, you have an immediate advantage. People are more likely to tick boxes than actually say what they believe.
Yeah.
And then there's an argument against it. Apparently, they don't have the resources or whatever, that they needed to be tick boxes and not these writing questions. But there's plenty of writing questions on the census form, so that seems to be fudging the topic a little bit. Yeah. But you know, ideally, the first question would be: do you practice a religion? Yes or no? And then, if yes,
what is it?
What is it?
Okay, well, that's more
clear. More granular.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And that would be the results of that would be very comparable to previous questions.
Okay, well, that would make it more clearer to the person filling it out.
Yeah,
you know.
And this one is a little bit more. This question is a little bit more holistic in terms of, and I think now we're going to go towards the church itself.
Okay.
What do you think? How do you find the response to these changing attitudes, to these changing votes, to these just increase in secularism and open thinking and forward thinking and all that kind of stuff? How do you find the church has rightly or wrongly or negatively or positively responded to these changes, such as always with Bishop, what's his name again? Dermot.
The Bishop of Galway, is it?
No, Dublin.
Jim Martin.
Yeah.
Yes. Doesn't he come out with some unbelievable bangers sometime? You know what I mean? Like in response to certain issues, and you're kind of like, that is the most tone deaf thing I've heard. You know, and it's completely out of touch with time. But what's your take on how church is seeing this?
I mean, I consider myself almost an outsider to that. I find them hugely entertaining. They are. I love when this happens because I mean it helps people towards our side of the fence. I think, you know, they are, for a lot of what they say, as you said, bangers or clangers or whatever, they sometimes are their own worst enemy, I think. And even sometimes strong believers will go,
oh God, I can't believe,
like,
yes.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, without getting into specifics, but yeah, and you know, what's interesting to see as well is a lot of priests, and rightly so in their own way, have come out and said, look, we don't want these a la carte Catholics baptizing their kids just getting schools. They don't want that because it's kind of,
I love you said that. A la carte Catholics.
Yeah.
I think that's
100% correct.
That's amazing.
But no one's winning when that happens because, you know, they're supposedly when you get your child baptized into the church, you are promising to raise it that way. They expect to see the numbers grow in their church, and that they're set up for that. And then what happens is the child is baptized and never seen again.
Yep.
And, from a secular point of view, it's not winning either, because they have all these figures. And as I described earlier, you can't leave the church. So it's this discrepancy I'm talking about, that just no one wins.
Hidden numbers.
Yeah. Skewed figures, So like, happy if a priest is going, no, we don't want your fake baptisms here. That's fine. That will help speed up the process of basically the laws and the systems matching the will of the people, which is really what democracy should be.
Exactly.
Not the people trying to bend themselves to what the rules are at the minute,
But that's only possible if you have an informed populace.
Yes.
It's otherwise it can't be done. And if the numbers aren't correct and we're missing, I don't know, another 300,000 actual no followers, then this number that we have, nearly 470,000 in 2016, is simply not enough to sway certain policy decisions. But if they come out with 1 point, I imagine in the next census, all of a sudden we maybe even hit 2 million. How quick do you think all of a sudden policy will be informed? Because then they're like, oh, wait a minute, this is actually a real true representation of this country.
Yes.
We need to be careful not to step on people's toes. Because people, like you said, it's just, even strong believers, the things the church says and does, it's turning people away, where it's too crass sometimes.
Yes.
And like they're nearly a caricature of themselves in some regards.
And don't forget, the major political parties will never lead the charge on an issue. They will always follow. They will always wait to see what the trends are. They jump on bandwagons. They don't risk votes. Trends. Yeah.
But it's all short-sightedness and short-term planning.
Yeah.
And now this whole idea of, the endless string of accusations, the proven accusations, the problems they're running in, and there is a scandal every few days globally. It is endless and it is relentless. And if this was, and what I'm trying to get at is the few bad apples kind of concept, where it's kind of like, it's not all priests. Now, I take issue with that, because obviously not all priests are either pedophiles or rapists or even psychological abusers in some cases, where they have absolute control over, say, a village, that kind of thing, maybe in generations gone by. But obviously not all of them are like that. But we're not talking about a few bad apples, say, for example, a dodgy CEO or something like that. We're talking about tens of thousands of priests. And not only that, the systematic, conscious cover-up from the highest of the Vatican. How is this even possible? And why this blindness towards it? Because, your local priest is lovely and he's done all your weddings and your funerals and he's a lovely man. He genuinely cares about his charges. But to just blindly throw it away, that it's not a few bad apples. It's in numbers in the tens of thousands. And the victims, I don't even want to take a guess at the amount of victims. We're not talking about a few bad apples. Why this blindness? This kind of, it's hard for me. And again, it's this culture
it's
of
accountability,
Catholicism.
I think, too, a lot of it as well. They're not stepping up to take any accountability for what's happened to hundreds and thousands of people in Ireland and America and all over the world. All over the world, it's been affected by the Catholic Church in some sort of way. There's no accountability. I find it very difficult to even accept the fact that they're not even taking accountability.
Zero.
It's
Zero.
awful,
they brush it off. Well, what I thought just that came to my head was, this is all controlled by the Vatican. It is the source of the institution.
Yeah.
If this was any other country, the UN would hang sanctions on it. I just realized that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a form of populist war crimes. You know what I mean? But again, this.
Yeah. I think the important thing to realize is, in terms of abuse and all that, it is the priests that are clearly responsible. That is their crime. But as regards cover-up, that is the main criticism of the institution.
Yes, exactly.
And it's important to make the distinction between the two. And in that sense, it's the cover-up that's what we have to be critical of when it comes to the church. The child abuse is on the individual abuser, and that's one thing. But it's the cover-up that you have to take issue
Well,
with.
not just the child abuse. It's to do with the mother and baby homes. It's to do
Absolutely.
It's there's
forced adoptions, the sales of children, every form of neglect.
Yeah, it's the Catholic Church has a lot to answer for in terms of the last 60, 70 years of this country and what it's done to the population. No wonder people are questioning, this Atheist Ireland, and they're questioning, the openings of, now the doors have been opening to the mother and baby homes and to the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's angering people more now is, as like I said, there's no accountability. We need somebody, we need an organisation like Atheist Ireland to open up and say, look, this is who we are. This is, you have your own free will and power to believe in what you believe now. But there definitely, for me, has to be accountability in some sort of way or form from the Catholic Church, especially the whole abuse scandal and everything that's like that.
Yeah.
Going back to what Shane says, like the whole, what are you saying, the bad apples?
I'm not sure it's only a few bad apples.
Yeah.
But it's not.
No, it's not. Definitely not.
It feels to me like it's a few good apples, but
kind of.
That's just my perception of it.
Yeah.
But
or these stories when that you hear about where people knew what was we're generations back now, or maybe decades back, but people knew what was going on in the village, but nobody said a word. It was the sheer oppressive power of the priest or the bishop.
Yes.
It's phenomenal.
The priest had the power to ruin your life, to ensure you...
Just like
that.
Absolutely. Yeah. He just knocked on the door and that was it. I mean, it's incredible, but I think that's something for people to just ponder for a minute and say, like, it's not just a few bad apples. Yeah, your local priest might be a wonderful man, but I think this is on a scale unimaginable, and we're not done. We're nowhere near done. And the church is nowhere near done in having to recognize what's actually going on and how they need to change.
Yeah. And if you look at South America at the minute, has a really strong Catholic influence, and they're kind of where we were maybe 50 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
You just cannot doubt that in 40, 50 years' time, they'll be having similar conversations to this, you know.
And it's good.
And by the way, down there, the Catholic Church are still doing exorcisms and, you only, to get the true measure of religion, you need to see them when their influence is at its greatest, when they have the most power and when they've nothing to fear. And whether we're talking about a different location like South America or a different time like the Dark Ages or something, that's when you see the true measure of a religion, when it's untempered,
That's a good point. Very good point. Now, something interesting that I found was the Association of Atheist Ireland with other religious groups. So I'd say, because I follow you guys on Facebook and keep up to date as to what's going on, what's being done, and very often the stand outside the GPO in Dublin will have other people from other faiths standing beside you, or even attending a lot of meetings, or even kind of political agenda meetings and stuff like that. Yeah. That was always kind of fascinating to me. What's the idea behind it? To have representatives from other religious communities standing side by side, and talking to the people.
So, in particular, with regards to education, Atheist Ireland works with the Ahmadi Muslims of Ireland, who are based in Galway here, actually. So happens.
That's the poster that you saw in
the bus.
And you were like, what? Since when do Muslims advertise
Yeah, I was fascinated by that, actually.
But then it's no different than those little Jesus placards on the bus either. You know what I mean?
And the Evangelical Alliance of Ireland as well. And while we have very different worldviews, we are all equally discriminated against by the education system.
Wow. Okay.
And so on those issues, we lobby together because much the same as Atheist Ireland puts a whole load of atheist voices together, or the alliance that we have with those two puts all of our collective voices together and go, the education system does not serve us well here. It discriminates against us. And the more voices you have saying something clearly, the more effective it is. So while we would, disagree with them on a lot of subjects, on this we are united. And not everyone agrees with it. It has to be said. It's a strange sight.
That's why I find it so fascinating. But again, it speaks to inclusivity. I think that's what I mean. Yeah. It's kind of like, this is what I said in a podcast before, and I think it's well and true. Rather than look at what separates and what differentiates us, we need to be looking at common ground. We all, no matter where you're from in the world, no matter what your background, we all have the same hopes and fears. We all get tired. We all get hungry. We all need somebody. We all need to communicate. We all need to, this is something. And now in this case, we all need a good and common and inclusive education system. Do you see what I mean? How uniting that actually is, rather than picking out the differences? Because you could be standing at the same stand debating surahs and chapters in the Bible. You know what I mean? But you're not. You're saying put all of that aside because we're coming together as human beings. Because our fear is that we're not being included. Isn't that a great thing?
Absolutely,
it is. It's a uniting factor.
Oh, 100%.
Your humanity is. Anyway, that's philosophizing again. I'm very new agey today. I don't know what's going on.
You're big time new agey today. What's going on?
But one thing I wanted to talk about is, and we're going to morality and stuff like that a little bit later. That's always a fascinating theme that I see. But, and something that somebody had mentioned to me, do you think that atheists in general evangelize?
Evangelize?
In the sense that, I know, very oxymoronic, but this militant atheism kind of thing, it sounds like forgetting the fact that there are street preachers with giant microphones blaring down how a horrible human being you are, but yet you have a stand and you have the audacity to question my belief. And this is, again, way back to the beginning, this misconception about atheism, this militant atheism. But do you think that you're evangelizing? Are you coming across as a bit strong and hence still using the word atheist rather than secular kind of thing? Do you think you're...
No, but let's break that down a little bit. Yep. So first of all, to talk about the table, we don't approach anyone. They always approach us. Yeah.
But how dare you have a table?
How dare you?
How dare you even question it by putting that table there?
Yeah, and then on top of that, I might ask a question like, have you heard of us before? But otherwise, I let them lead the conversation and they talk about what they want to talk about, because we are an information table. And I think those last two words get forgotten about sometimes. And so what we get is a lot of people will have queries about their children's rights in school, or, you know, what laws there are. They're asking us questions. And we don't, unless people want to get into a theological debate, which sometimes happens, but generally it's questions, and we answer with facts primarily about what the laws are, what their rights are. I don't think that fits the definition of evangelizing in any sense.
Yes.
Your initial question was, do atheists evangelize? Well, I would always say in Atheist Ireland, or only, we don't have a lot of like ground rules or things. So the only thing we tend to conform to is, even though we don't insist on it per se, is that we're atheists. You can join Atheist Ireland if you're not, but we find that doesn't happen. But otherwise though, there probably are atheists that are maybe too vocal, too brash. And I know when I was younger, I might have been a little bit more, you know, when I first founded, you know, you're on that honeymoon period, you're like, everyone needs to know. And this is not the way to talk to people in general, but it's not really a way to win people over, is to start ramming things down their throats. So are you familiar with the term street epistemology?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you seen
I haven't actually finished it, but there's a book about it as well.
Peter Boghossian, I think, is Boghossian. So I read those books and I love it, and it's a great way to engage with people, and I've tried to work that into the table. But the only difference is that for street epistemology, you're approaching people from a very neutral point of view, in that they don't know what you're about at all. Mm-hmm. And every question is neutrally worded, and you don't take sides, and you just ask people, you know, how sure are they of particular beliefs, and how did they come to those beliefs, and maybe ask them some comparison questions. I don't get the luxury of doing that, because before you get near me, you know what my position is. But still, I learned a lot from it, and that just how to
debate and conversation just in general,
talk and try and stay away from arguments and shouting people down and all that, because that's not constructive, and nobody walks away feeling happy from that. And it's much more interesting just to go, well, why do you believe that? And it leads to more interesting conversations anyway, you know.
Get them to challenge themselves.
So if I ever find myself, like, I might start to sound like I'm preaching, I try to pull that in and be like, oh, wait, that's what I believe, but let's talk about, you know, what you believe and approach it that way, you know. It's much more constructive, basically.
You can't forget in these things is as well that, and as you just said there, if you find yourself getting a bit preachy, isn't it funny that there's just religiously kind of words to describe these situations, such as proselytizing or evangelizing or being preachy, but also remember is you're always dealing with human, and you yourself are human as well. Like you said, you're fired up. You want to share your knowledge. Yeah. But don't forget the human factor behind.
Yeah. And just on that, it's an echo of, I spoke to the Gaul Advertiser last year, and it was something I said off the cuff, but he used it as the headline, and it was it was fine. It was just something I hadn't focused on, but he latched onto it. I find at the table, when you meet Catholics and you talk to them, you find you have much more in common with them than not. You know, so it's like you're saying, we're all humans and we largely believe most of the same stuff. We just,
whatever you say, whatever is the most obscene, I'm going to use that as just to let you know, as our title.
The tagline.
Yeah.
So just out of general interest here, so say somebody approached you for information at your table, and it's like, I'm kind of trying to go down the whole road of guilt here. Like, you know, how would you maybe set somebody's at ease about, you know, like, okay, I don't know much about you as an atheist, but I all of a sudden I don't believe in anything and I feel guilty for this. Would you get questioned about that, about, you know, the morality of guilt, especially from being a Catholic and especially from other religions, you know, like the whole, you know, sin, and, you know, there has to be some sort of element of that as well involved. Okay. You know, would you get questioned like that?
I'm struggling a little bit to relate to that question exactly now.
It's more like, say, a Catholic, a person who was brought up as a Catholic, who, you know, the original sin and the way you were taught as a Catholic, and then all of a sudden one day you wake up and you're like, okay, well, I don't believe anymore. I want to start thinking of other ways to live my life, and then I want to approach the whole atheist thing. Is there a morality here? Is there something, you know, is there a guilt sort of thing going on?
The only thing you're reminding me of, you remind me of one person in particular who seemed to have religion deeply entrenched in them, and they were, I think, I'm trying to remember now exactly, I don't think they were Catholics. I think they were, Catholic. I think they might have been a born again Christian or something. Yeah. But they were deeply convinced that they were a sinner, and that unless they tried their best, they were going to hell.
That's what I'm trying to get
And
at,
I just said, I don't think that at all. I said, you seem like a lovely person. I don't think that's going to happen to you.
That factor, I interviewed, sorry to interrupt just as a point, but I interviewed an ex-elder, Lloyd Evans, only a couple of weeks ago, and this factor of guilt is such a strong, and I'm amazed that we only got to it now. Yes, but it's driving force.
But I think the point I wanted to make there though is they were quite taken aback at that, because I think they come up to me looking for a fight, I think, and they were telling me all this, and I think the fact that I kind of complimented them, it seemed like something they hadn't heard very much. I was like, no, you seem lovely. I can't imagine why you would be punished.
So you obviously made them think about it, basically.
I like to think so, yeah.
Sad, isn't it?
Yeah. They've just been told their whole lives they were wicked and
worthless.
Whenever the original sin and all, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Which is washed off and repented by, but yet you're a sinner. But anyway, it's...
Yeah.
But it's a sad thing.
And whenever we talk about this kind of stuff, I most think of Hitchens. He had great ways of describing this, and it's just one of his simple catchphrases was, you know, created sick and commanded to be well. You know, it's this idea that, well, like, why he's given us all these urges, and God is supposedly created us, but all that's wrong. It's like, what sort of a design is that? You know, imagine you created a robot and, like, you know, programmed it to do something, and then smashed it every time it did. It's like, no, that's wrong. That's just doesn't make sense. You just wouldn't do that, you know. But we're not robots, and so as you said, if we're given this kind of conflict, it just leads to so much misery in the world. I think it's more of us,
a lot of us are conditioned. Would that be a right word?
Yeah.
We're conditioned to feel guilt, and we're conditioned. So then all of a sudden, the coin flips over, and we're now thinking a bit more freer and stuff. There's that still kind of a guilt.
There is.
There is. Do you know what I mean? It's like
there is, but hopefully with generations, if we change our ways, that'll be less of an issue for our kids, grandkids, etc.
I would hope so. I really, really hope so.
Kelvin, let me ask you: you're a non-believer. You're an atheist. Why aren't you going around killing and raping and stealing?
Okay, fair enough.
And the reason why he's smiling the way it is, this is a very common theme: morality.
It is.
And that's why I literally put it that way.
Okay.
Because this is how it's so often brought about.
So it's a fun one to answer. There's probably lots of answers, but
yeah.
I mean, if the person asking me that is a religious person, and they're claiming that the only reason that they're not doing these things is because they believe in God and this is why. I usually try to make an excuse to leave the conversation because I would be afraid if I convinced them there was no God. I'd be, that's kind of a conversation stopper when you think about it. Well, you're like, the stakes are very high here, and I can't really win, can I?
No.
It's like letting the psychopath go.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
it's an interesting way to think about it, isn't
absolutely.
it? Have you ever given it a thought like that?
No. That's why I started laughing. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps a more nuanced answer might go something like this. The human species has been around, varying opinions on the matter, but roughly the average is about 100,000 years. Okay. And supposedly, if you want to take Jesus as being the messenger of our morals, or maybe even go a few thousand years before that, but at 2,000 to 5,000 years ago, we got all these commandments from God, and apparently before that, killing was okay. Well, I don't think we would have managed 95,000 years if at least a good chunk of us went, we probably shouldn't kill each other. We should probably work together.
We're a cooperative species.
We are. And it's evolutionary beneficial to cooperate. If we were all going around killing each other, there'd be none of us left by now. We just wouldn't be here. And we didn't need any commandments or stone tablets, tablets of any kind, iPads included, to tell us
or
that.
special glasses to read them.
Yeah. And actually, that whole what I just said there, there's a bigger point. Is like if you believe in like if you're a Catholic, or the whole Christian religion is that like we've been around 100,000 years, and for some reason, for the first 98,000 years, God sort of just sat there with his arms folded and went, this is interesting, isn't it? Maybe now is the time to send down a son and steer them in the right direction. It's a very long time to wait, and in that time period, people had very short lives, and they dying of all kinds of things, including their teeth and all sorts of misery. Not a good time, I think it's fair to say. All those people didn't go to heaven because they hadn't had the revelation yet, but really that was God's fault, wasn't it? And then that's before we even get into, okay, now we're in the last 2,000 years, let's examine what the story is really about. And there's the sending down the son thing and the virgin thing. It's all very convoluted, really. It's kind of a strange one. But I don't understand the time periods involved there and how it makes sense. Why would you create a species and then wait 98,000 years to give them your good news? You'd be, I don't know, I'd be quicker with my...
your news.
Wouldn't you think?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I love the analogy of this. It's brilliant. Yeah. I think it's amazing that it's...
Sometimes you need to look at things in a more simplistic way. You know, you can get really into the nuts and bolts of theological debate, but just from a pragmatic, now immediately the response is going to be that's God's plan. Only God knows what God wants. But again, if you look at it from a pragmatic perspective, and for example, like you said, timeline, then you're kind of, okay.
When you look at God's supposed creations, though, I don't think planning is his strong suit.
Absolutely not.
First of all, to acknowledge him as a creator and not acknowledge evolution is just at this stage being proven blatantly wrong. So we have evolved, and there's all sorts of weird things with the way our biology is, and these appendages we don't need, and tailbones. It's very clear we evolved. It's an odd way to sort of create a species if that's what you were doing, but then come up a level. If you look at like the cosmos and the way the planets and the destruction of stars, and I mean it's
fairly uninhabitable.
It's
a horrible place to try and live.
At best, it's an inefficient use of space.
Exactly. You know? Exactly. Yeah.
And it's chaotic, and it doesn't seem to follow much of a plan. So
entropy.
It's an interesting one to think about, at least for a few minutes, and just go, this just doesn't seem to fit with the narrative of organized religion, you know.
And before we get too heavy into theological debates or anything like that, let's pull back a little bit and talk about you being a vocal atheist, or somebody who puts himself out there to help people understand, or to work for an organization like that. Has there been any negative impact for you, if you don't mind me asking, family-wise, friends, how you're perceived? Have you been butting heads with anybody about this in your life? Or do people just go?
Luckily, but maybe uninterestingly for this podcast, I have to say, no would primarily be the response.
Doesn't that speak to this hidden subculture again?
Yeah, a bit. So the most negative one I can think of was someone was chatting to my father, who's a bus driver, so he meets the public the whole time. And he was having a little rant about this guy that was down in Shop Street at a table. Anyway, like, you know. And my father, oh yeah, that's my son. And is that the guy that manages a particular shop? I won't mention names.
No.
Yeah. And oh yeah, it is. Yeah. Of course. God, if I'd known that, I wouldn't have shopped there for the last few years. Like, I wouldn't have.
Yeah.
So he would have boycotted me, basically, if that's kind of the most interesting negative response in terms of like maybe an actual practical effect on my life or my livelihood, maybe. But it's interesting because, of course, I don't own the shop. I only managed it. So his lack of business would have more affected the business owner than me. But I will say, you know, I don't know that I would have been as brave to do the table in Galway if I worked in Galway with the public as I do.
Okay. Yeah.
It just so happens the shop I mentioned is up in Mayo, so it was far enough away that, you know, the thing about doorsteps, I wasn't quite doing that. And that's still the case. It's a concern of mine. I don't think it's ever practically affected me. My friends are mostly amused at what I do, and while, as I said, they're all atheists, but they don't really get the need as to why I do what I do. And I usually tell them, well, you know, I think when you have kids and you're sending them to school and they're being fed with this, you might maybe either appreciate or at least understand why I do what I do. I think that's when it might affect them more.
Okay.
My family then, and I wasn't clear enough about this at the start of my intro. My parents were great. I can't give them enough credit. You know, they, like I say, I was baptized, communion, confirmation. They always acknowledged that I was just doing this to fit in, to not stand out. They didn't want me to be bullied. But they always, and rightly so, because of the way the system is. It doesn't need to be like that, but it is. But they always encouraged me to think for myself a little bit. And
that's wonderful.
But pretty quickly I realized, this is a bit weird, because all the stuff we learn in school, all of it is 100% backed up at home, except for this thing. This is weird. It's like, so 2 and 2 is for in school, it's also at home. But like we have this thing about, God created the world. Oh, yeah, but a little bit of science and age appropriate stuff. But it's maybe not. Maybe does that make sense? You have a think about it yourself. And so I always knew there was just a little something there. But like I say, never really thought about it hard until I was maybe 19, 20. And even then it was more when I was 24, 25 and all this stuff came out of it, like I discussed. Yeah. That's when I really started to think about it. Where am I with this? Because when you're 18, 19, you move out of home and maybe job on points and stuff, you're just not talking about religion. It's just not a thing. It's not a thing, But I was lucky to have been brought up like that, I think.
Good. That's good. Now to bring this towards the end, I think. Close, in a nutshell, is there a message out there for the people if you want to summarize everything that you want to bring to the people, and also about activism, and then you can lead on to and why it would be important to help or to become involved, and then also afterwards, then you can plug some links and where do people become involved, how do they become involved, not just in Galway but also all over the country, online, wherever it is.
Sure. Okay. I think my first priority, whether it's at the table or giving interviews like this, is it's fine and it's normal to not believe in God. You might not be in the majority, but it's perfectly fine.
Can you just repeat that again? Just say that for our listeners again.
Okay.
It's okay not to believe in God. Just say it again, because I really want our listeners to hear what you're saying.
Yeah. It's okay to not believe in God. And if you're going through a transitional period of doubt or whatever, it can be hard, and it can be hard if maybe your family members are against that. But I guarantee if it's a belief or a decision you come to of your own free will and you get comfortable with it, it is very liberating, and it can sort of remove any, if there's all those conflicts in your head right now, they will go away. Read about it. Just read. Whether it's the internet, whether it's books, read about it. And the most important thing is you come to your own conclusions. I'd say, read Richard Dawkins, read Chris Richards, but don't believe it just because they say. Think about it yourself. Yeah. Do your own research and, apply, science and reason to what you believe in, because if you do that, it will always be at your back. And there's a really great comfort in that. You don't need faith for any of it. And that's something we didn't touch on is, atheism is a faith. It's a belief as well.
I was actually that popped into my head as you said, use science and reason. That scares people off, because a lot of times, and this again in social media, you just see comments of like, but science it's a belief system as well, kind of, even though it's absolutely not. But the strict adherence to atheism as well.
Yeah, so
it's bizarre. Kind of oxymoronic.
Funny. Again, not a term about strict adherence to atheism, because like you described earlier. Because it's not. It's just one simple comment on one simple aspect of belief, and you can believe all sorts of things and not as an atheist. There's not a rule book. There's it's not a whole set of guidelines at all. But it would commonly be linked with just decide for yourself. Look at the facts and just arrive at your decisions based on that, and not this kind of submission to authority instead.
See if it makes sense. Find out for yourself.
That would be the main one. Just
and it's a good one.
It's
a good people for possibly on the fence, not knowing or even just wanting to know about it.
Yeah. That's atheism. Atheist Ireland then. Well, I'm not going to pitch the hard sell here. We always welcome members, obviously. We think what we do is important just to effect change. We've been effective in the last few years, and we intend to continue that. We sort of have two relatively major things in the horizon. As a country, our president's judges, high office, have to take a religious oath at the minute. If you think that's okay, just imagine if we were a country where you had to swear to become president that there was no God. Your belief should not be relevant to those state positions.
Yeah.
And we're hopeful that we can get rid of that, either replace it with a secular oath or just not have anything at all for that part. You just, again, the fairest way is usually to just be neutral in these things. And the second bigger one that's going to take time and resources is the education system. We sum up our views and goals on that with an acronym, the Education Pact. It's PACT. And in our opinion, they are the 4 pillars of the education system that need to change together to achieve a fair secular education system. PACT is patronage, access, curriculum, teaching. So patronage is obviously the influence the Catholic Church has on schools, and that needs to go. Access is this baptism barrier that is claimed to be gotten rid of. It's kind of there and kind of not. It's still basically there. But access is fine, but there's no point in having free access to a school that then discriminates against you once you get in the door. Yeah. That's the curriculum and the teaching part. The curriculum obviously is
materials and
exactly
the education itself.
Yes, but also teachers themselves have to go through this sort of in a lot of cases a religious charade. They have to pretend to be religious, or the teachers training like the Opus Dei, all of this stuff, it's all like religiously entrenched as well, and that needs to change as well, because there's no point in having those first 3 if the teachers have to be religious.
The delivery system is not working. A very interesting point, and this is something a lot of people don't know. My wife actually wanted to switch over from her current career over into teaching kids with disability. She would have to go through full-on religious education as part of her course. So we have a wonderful person who would be such potential to teach kids with disabilities, especially in that niche, who's now forced, she hasn't done it, but in the end, but she would have been forced to go through this rinse and repeat thing. And that was a barrier. It's unfortunate, and that's very important as well, and you're absolutely right.
So that's the big one for us. So like if you want to support the secularization of the education system, then I think supporting us would be a good way to go about it. We're making the biggest headway in that.
And how do people reach you?
Okay, so I would recommend the website has been the most informative. And that's very simply atheist.ie. Very easy remembering.
Oh, nice. I thought it was going to be /dot.
No.
Super.
Atheist.ie will get you there.
And then you're on the other social media platforms as well, like Facebook.
Of course, we're on Facebook and Twitter. You can find us easy enough there. But the other thing I'd like to recommend is, because I'm sure a lot of people considering this, we mentioned education a lot. It's the big thing on people's minds. Also check out our kind of a sub-website is Teach Don't Preach, that has all of the educational resources, rights, forms you can fill out, all of the information in one kind of cohesive website.
Wow.
That's a really good resource for parents. If you have no intention of joining us or whatever, if you're concerned at all about a non-believer child, and even in a lot of cases just religious minority, Teach Don't Preach is the way to go. It has all the information.
Very interesting. It's a great site as well.
Yeah.
Very, very. And I follow the page on Facebook. And as for the tables, a good way, I think, how I keep up to date where the stands are and all that is...
Facebook is probably the best resource. So that you'll see the events posted up as they're coming, and hopefully there's one relatively near if you're interested.
Well...
This has been an amazing time talking to you. Thank you for coming to...
Absolute pleasure.
I was going to say the same. Absolute pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah. And folks, to you out there, check
we're
it out.
We're on our social media as well.
Yeah, read it. And we're going to be linking, putting the links into the descriptions anyway, wherever it is, YouTube or on our podcast hoster. So folks, go check out the material. See what's out there. And maybe if you didn't even give it a consideration, maybe now is the time to see what what else is going on.
And also to make you think about it. Yeah.
And think about it.
Think about it.
And even if it's not the religious or the atheistic aspect of it, Teach, Don't Preach, like you said, these are policy decisions. And Atheist Ireland as well. These are really important policy decisions, even if you don't care for it. Go check it out. Kelvin, we thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you so much.
Humbly, it was really fascinating. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And this is our usual runtime for an episode is 50 to 52 minutes. We just blasted through an hour and a half. That's how good it was. Yeah. And we barely stuck to script because you're an incredibly good guest.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, folks.
And thank you. I'm delighted. I'm so happy that you came to sit with us. It's great. Thank you so much, Kelvin. Thanks.
You managed to listen to the Rum Boys talk on Random Urban Memories. Just like and subscribe where you can on all platforms.